Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 181. Agmar Chsim Teva, Shona Teva Mesuka, Begashmis, Beruchnis, Begashmis, Gam Yochad, Bebon Chaim Mezena, Bekulim Rivka. In the language of the Rebbe, as he would bench Klal Yisrael and every individual, first before Rosh Hashanah, and then after Rosh Hashanah, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where we are now, in the Aseres he made Teshuva, the holiest time of the year, when we say Dirsha Hashem b'Yimotzi Korua b'Yesei Korev. As Chassidus explains, it means beseech God when he's to be found, and call to him when he's close. And Chassidus explains, isn't God always close and always to be found? Ein Eid Milvadei. Hashem is everywhere. There's no fluctuations and no changes. But there's changes from our end. Looking from this side of the glass, there are times when we are not, there are more filters or more layers that do not allow or make it more difficult to access the divine, even though it's always accessible. And then there are times when there are less filters and less layers, just like it is with space. God is everywhere, and yet the Harabayis, the Beis HaMikdash, has a particular Gedusha. What makes it holier than another place in the world where God is also present? The answer is that there are less layers and less filters and less shells or that don't allow the divine to be as transparent. And the same thing with a Beis HaMedrash and a Beis HaKnesses in space. And the same in time, that's what these 10 days of Teshuva are. They begin with Rosh Hashanah, they conclude in Yom Kippur. Today we are in the 4th day of Tishrei, because yesterday was Shabbos that went right from the first 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and we're going toward Yom Kippur. So, of course, this should be the most primary thing to speak about, Chassidus Applied, regarding all these special days. But being that today itself is Shem Gedalya, so I want to begin to share a few words about Shem Gedalya, which I don't believe in previous episodes of MyLife, Chassidus Applied we discussed, at least not more elaborately, relatively speaking. So Tzom Gedalya, let's just begin. What is Tzom Gedalya? Tzom Gedalya, Gedalya was a governor appointed by Nebuchadnezzar. His name was Gedalya ben Achikam. He was appointed by Nebuchadnezzar after the destruction of the temple in Yehuda, in the area where it was called Yehuda. We call Yehuda and Shemron, which is Yerushalayim area, and around that area, to be the governor for the remaining Jews that remained and did not leave Israel. And then there was Gedalya was a Jew, and came from Malchus, from a family, a kingly family. That's why he was appointed, because the Babylonians respected the kingly families. But there was another Jew by the name of Ishmael ben Nesanya, and he was jealous of Gedalya. He felt he deserved, because he felt he came from Malchus Beis David, not just from the kings, but also specifically from the house of David. And there's different opinions exactly what that means in relation to Gedalya. And he began to plot a conspiracy to kill him. Gedalya was warned by his close people that Ishmael ben Nesanya wants to kill him, but he was a very noble and a very dignified person and did not want to believe it. He invited this Ishmael for Rosh Hashanah Asuda, and during that time he was killed. There are two opinions when the murder happened. Whether it happened on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and because it's Rosh Hashanah, that's why we don't designate a fast until the next day, or did it actually happen the day after Rosh Hashanah? There are different opinions on the matter. But because of that, because he was a decent and a benevolent governor, even though he did advocate not rebelling against Nebuchadnezzar, nevertheless, but since he was that type of compassionate and benevolent leader, we commemorate that with one of the 4 Tzomis. This is considered one of the 4 Tzomis Divrei Sofrim, which means not like Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. Not like Yom Kippur, which is in Teresh B'Ksav, but the 4 Tzomis, including Tisha B'Av, which include Tisha B'Av, Shavasar B'Tammuz, Tzom Gedalya, and Tainis Esther. So these are the 4 Tzomis that we know. We always talk about the 4 fasts. In contrast to Yom Kippur, which is mamish in Teresh B'Ksav, meaning in Vayikra, and therefore it has the Teresh B'Ksav power. So Tzom Gedalya became a fast day, and this type of year, in a sense, it's like a double, according to the opinion that even Tzom Gedalya being Gimel Tishrei was pushed off. So this is like a push-off of a push-off because it's on Dalet Tishrei because of Shabbos. And the Rebbe in a number of sichos, especially in the words that he would speak Tzom Gedalya, as we know, after Tafshin Lamed Ches, which is 40 years ago, when the Rebbe had the heart attack. As we all know afterwards, the Rebbe began to increase, double, and even triple his activities. And one of the things he added after the heart attack was Divrei Kvushin, reinstituting a custom to speak words of inspiration, words of Tshuva, connected to the different fast days. The first time the Rebbe spoke those words was on the Sarah B'Tevis, the 10th of Tevis, that year, Tavshin Lamed Ches. But then after that, he began speaking on the 17th of Tammuz, on Tisha B'Av, as I mentioned. I have to correct myself. I said before the fourth same, as I mentioned, as Taina says, that's not correct. The fourth is Asara B'Tevis. 3 of them are connected directly to the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Asara B'Tevis is when Nebuchadnezzar surrounded the city. Shavuos B'Tammuz is when he scaled the walls. Tisha B'Av is when he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. We're talking about the first temple. And Tzom Gedalya is a Tzom that comes afterwards. It wasn't directly connected to the Chum because it was already the destruction had happened. It was, as the Pasuk in Yirmiyahu says, that there was still the shades, there was still a remainder of some of the embers, of some of the dignity of Yehuda under the rule of Gedalya. And that was also extinguished. Even those remnants were extinguished with Gedalya's murder. Tainasesta is a separate, it's not one of those 4. So let me just correct myself. And that is, so Tzom Gedalya, in that sense, it's a pushed off, and as we know, there's the opinion regarding Shavuos B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av, Kivin de'itche, since it's pushed off, may it be pushed off altogether. And the Rebbe's inimitable approach to the Tainesim in general, that even though on the surface they are negative, but they're also Eis Ratzon, Ayem Ratzon LaHashem, these are auspicious times, a certain channel opens up. And Tzom Gedalya is, of all of the fasts, the Rebbe explains in a number of sichos in Tafshin Nun Aleph, he spoke about it. He spoke about it, I believe, in Tafshin Mem Beis and Tafshin Mem Zayin. The Rebbe speaks about the uniqueness, obviously, of Tzom Gedalya, because Tzom Gedalya is in the weirdest of times. It's coming in the 10 days of Teshuva. We have a fast coming Yom Kippur. That's why there are many kulas when a person can't really fast. Difficult for them to fast. So Yom Kippur, of course, takes precedence, and that's why Tzom Gedalya, there are many leniencies around it. And it comes like in days when, why are we fasting exactly when we should be doing tshuva, even though tshuva is connected to fast, but this tshuva is not necessarily the Aseres tshuva. We don't focus on a fast and on a murder. So the Arizal speaks about this day as being a Yom Din, that the things that were not yumtuk, the gvuras that were not sweetened, the severities that were not sweetened on Rosh Hashanah, says that's what Tzom Gedalya is about. To give you the exact language that he uses, he says that the killing of murder of Gedalya was due to the teikef adinim, was due to the intensity of the severities and the lack of their sweetening through Tkiyah Shefer. So this is why it happened the day after Rosh Hashanah. So we see suddenly in these days, you have like so-called a dual type of personality. On one hand, these are unbelievable days, as I said, Dirsha Hashem b'motzei, God is close and we can reach Him. And yet we also have this extinguishing of that flame of Yehuda. As the Rebbe in his powerful way explains, that in truth is all these negative things are all for the positive. That indeed, this day will be transformed, as the Pasuk says, Yehovchi Yom Melu, these days, these 4 fasts, including the Tzom Gedalya, the fast of Gedalya, will be transformed and become L'meidim Tevim, Yilasasal Simcha L'meidim Tevim. There'll be days of joy and celebration and holidays. So Tzom Gedalya's holiday is in a sense focused on Malchus Beis David, Mashiach, which is both the fact that Gedalya himself came from the family of Malchus, and especially the jealousy was connected because of Malchus Beis David. So there's a certain positive element. In a sense, he wanted the Mashiach to be represented. Beis David and David, even though he did it with bad intentions, but ultimately when it will be transformed, that aspect of it will be revealed, which is also hinted to in the name Gedalya. Gedalya means greatness. Gadol Yudke, the greatness of God. Where do you see greatness in a murder like this? But because within it all lies a deeper power, even though right now it's negative, that deeper power, when that's revealed, will reveal that Gedalya, the greatness of godliness, that comes out in the Aseres Teshuva itself, one day that on the surface is a fast day, for the reasons I mentioned, and at the same time will be ultimately transformed when we do tshuva properly, which is what the cause is to bring the geula. Tshuva is the way. Yisrael miyad hein nigol, and Yisrael eis and tshuva, as the Rambam paskins about these days when Jews will do tshuva, miyad, immediately they will be redeemed. So in that sense, Shem Gedalya has an element, yes, it reminds us that there's still things to be corrected, but at the same time it's coming in these special days, so it leads us to a far greater revelation. And of course, as the Rebbe explains, especially in the Sikh and Tov Shinun Aleph, the connection to Yom Kippur, because it's considered to be the third day of the month. In the regular, that's when we usually would fast. And Chayenu Yom HaShlishi also refers to Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is the third day, 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the Rebbe makes the connection. Both are in this month, in the 7th month, which is the month of Tishrei, and therefore all connected to all the great revelations that come through Yom Kippur, and Shem Gedalya is, so to speak, a beginning of that process. So what it means in Chassidus Applied, applying it to our lives, it means that no matter what we go through in our lives, we always have the spark always remains alive. Even after Gedalya was murdered, which was after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, so in some way you can say it's not worse than the destruction, but the fact that even something remained and even that was extinguished makes it a certain very powerful descent. And as the Rebbe explains in other Sikh, I think in Tov Shem Beis, that this is also a Jew killing a Jew. That's not, the other fasts have nothing to do with the Jew killing a Jew, even though it was caused through sinas chinam and baseless hatred. But bottom line was, it came from Nebuchadnezzar and the first destruction of the temple, the first temple destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the second one by the Romans. Where here Shem Gedalya was also focusing, unfortunately, seeing an act of Hepach of Avos Yisrael. But at the same time, even though we go through difficulties, what all this comes to teach us is when we fast and when we free and redeem those the sparks that fell and are entrapped in the darker places, we come out far stronger. So of course is a general lesson in all fast days, in all negative days, but especially now we're coming from the head of the year, Rosh Hashanah, and we're going into Yom Kippur. These are days when the spark gets closer to its mother's soul, meaning we connect, like the Moshel Chassidus Kiruv HaMoyer El HaNitzutz, which means that the luminary, think of it like a master flame, a mother flame, gets closer in orbit to each individual spark, which is Ner Hashem, the spark in each of our souls. So what happens when two flames get closer, especially a larger flame and a smaller flame? They kiss each other. They come and they melt into each other till they become one. So you can say, you know what, in Tishrei we focus on that connection, and so be it. So now Shem Gedalya comes and says that even then we don't forget that we'd also have sometimes shortcomings, we have challenges, and it's not just you enter Rosh Hashanah and we forget everything that happened. Of course we start a clean slate and we start with new energy and we have new hope and new possibilities. But at the same time we also have the ability to transform into greatness, Gedalya, into greatness, even those lapses that are still part of our lives. Which of course is the general theme, leading it into the general theme of where we are now. We're now in the last 10 days when Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain for the third of the 40-day periods that he was there, praying for forgiveness. And just in 6 days from now will come Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, coming Shabbos. This year it's on Shabbos, so it's like a triple Shabbos, because Yom Kippur is called Shabbos Shabbosin, and Shabbos is Shabbos. And of course, Yom Kippur supersedes and the pleasure and the meals and the way we usually celebrate a Shabbos, because now we reach it through a higher level that is a taste of the world to come, when there'll be no achila v'nei shtiyah. There'll be no eating and no drinking. As Chassidus says, it's called tainug bilti murgish. So there's two types of pleasure. There's a pleasure that you sense and you can relate to, that's defined and tangible and concrete. And there's a pleasure that's beyond taste, that's beyond consciousness. It's a super-conscious pleasure. And that's a far deeper one, and that's what Yom Kippur is about. So what all this means in psychological and applied terms means, this is a journey reaching the deepest parts of what we are made of, our soul. And unfortunately, sometimes it's through negative things, that's where we have to dig deeper. And Moshe Rabbeinu did exactly that. After the people had betrayed God with the golden calf, the building of the golden calf, comes Yom Kippur, Yom Teshuva Lakel, a day when Sumish Hayem, the etzem of the day, reaches the etzem of every individual, as we know, the yechida of the neshama. Every day of the year, there are 3 tefillas. They touch nefesh, ruach, neshama. On Shabbos and Yontif, there's 4 prayers, including on Rosh Hashanah. Shabbos and Yontif are 4 prayers because it reaches also Chaya, the 4th level of the soul. And Yom Kippur is the only day 5 prayers because we go into Yechid and Ne'ilah. The final prayer reaches Yechid. What's the difference between these 5 levels of the soul? In practical terms and in applied terms, we all have different dimensions, what we would call life. Biological life is surviving, existing, functioning. You breathe, your heart is beating, thank God, your mind is working. That's the basic minimum. But a person can be technically alive, but they're not emotionally alive. They feel like, they'll say, I feel like I'm a zombie. Or God forbid you see someone in a coma, vegetable. They can also be alive, but they're not fully alive. Comes the next level, that's nefesh, is biological life. Next is ruach, is emotional life. Emotional life means you feel. Your emotions are alive and kicking. And there's a emotional relationship, emotional stimulation, both to other people and of course to God. Then comes level 3, neshama. Though neshama is the general name for all levels of the soul, but when you break it down, neshama is connected to Chabad. Chabad is intellectual life, not just emotional life, and not just biological life. In other words, not nihi would be netzach ched yesod, and the spheres would be nefesh. Chagas, chesed, gvur, teferes, emotions would be ruach. And Chabad, meichin, is fully alive, that your mind is also working, your mind is stimulating, and your mind is active. But those are all the conscious faculties. And that's what we access every day of the year. Then comes Shabbos and Yontif. What's Shabbos and Yontif? It opens up another channel that you can access the transcendental dimension. Because these first 3 that I just mentioned, Chabad, Chagas, Nehi, or from the bottom up, Nehi, Chagas, Chabad, Ruach, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, are all conscious. That's the conscious faculties that we access on a daily basis in our daily routines, whatever it is that we're doing. And that too, obviously, we want it to be awake and alive, and every morning we say, Meida ani lefanecha, shechzarta bi nishmasi, melech Elkaim shechzarta bi nishmasi, you've returned my neshama. And mainly these 3 levels, the level of nefesh, ruach, neshama, comes Shabbos and Yontif, and it introduces Musaf, the 4th prayer, which is a 4th dimension that we can also access transcendence. Transcendence is that part of each human being that is more than just the functionality of biological life, more than just emotional life, more just intellectual, but that which we call keser in the spheres, which is transcendence beyond your faculties, even beyond your intellectual faculties. To put it in very palatable terms, even when a person experiences, for example, through music or art, or through other ways that they experience something that takes them and lifts them up to beyond their own conscious structure, that's transcendence. But obviously, talking about it in terms of Kedusha, Shabbos, Kedesh, and Yontif, that's a day when we can experience something beyond the existence. So more like Seviv Kalaman, if you wish, in the language of Chassidus. Seviv Kalaman, not just Mamala Kalaman, not just the imminent faculties, the Keches Primim, but also, which is Chabad, Chagas, Ni, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, but also the transcendent. Once a year, Achaz Bashana, as it's emphasized, Achaz is Yechida. The one is not just the one day a year. It's the oneness of the year. The oneness of the soul, and the Rebbe emphasizes so often, they're the Yechida of your soul, the 5th level, which is the core essence. You can't even describe it as transcendence. Sometimes described as Neshama L'Neshama would be Chaya, and then comes the core essence. That's just the thing that touches you at the deepest place. It doesn't even have to be it doesn't even manifest in transcendence. That's the 5th prayer in the Ilah when all the gates are open. And what we have then is the convergence in time, space, and in the human being, Yechida. The holiest man in the world, the Kohen Gadol, enters the holiest place in the world, the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, on the holiest day of the year, and the holiest moment on Yom Kippur. So time, space, Yom Kippur, space is the holiest place, and nefesh, and the person, Elam Shana Nefesh, the soul enters, and each of us has the Kohen Gadol within us, which is our Yechida, on the holiest day of Yom Kippur, and the holiest place. Obviously, we don't have the Beis HaMikdash and Kodesh Kodashim. Kodesh Kodashim today would be, whether it's wherever it is that you're davening, the space that you're at, you're accessing that inner core. And that's the 5th dimension. Well, you could say, why can't we have access to it every day of the year? So first of all, because we live in a world where to survive and be able to function in a world with in a proper way, that for us not to be annihilated or completely consumed, like when Moshe asks Hashem these days, show me your face, show me your glory, show me your face, and Hashem says, no man can see me and live, because we are unable to see Yechida all the time. At this point, it says, when Mashiach comes, it says, that our master's face will no longer be concealed, the kanaf, as concealed by a wing or by a garment, kanaf, but rather, we will see the master's face directly. As it's explained in different places, that Rebbe has a powerful interpretation when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, that when Hashem says to him, you cannot see my face and live, and then he says, but I will show you my back. So the Rebbe asks the question, you already said, no person can see me and live. So say, I'll console you by showing you your back. Why do you have to emphasize, like rub it in upon a loyro, and your face will not see? And the Rebbe interprets this is in the Sikh, in Tainis Esther, Tov Shemam Ches, and later we found it in Ponim Yofis from the Baal HaFlaw, the same Taich and Pasha Kisisa, that you have to read it this way. Reises acherai, uponai. I will show you my back and my face, but maponai, there you make the comma, lo yiro, you'll see by not looking. Through shlila, through dias shlila. So acherai, you can see directly your conscious faculties, or maybe with your transcendent faculty called chaya. But yechida you cannot see when you want to see it. It can't be on your terms. It's on God's terms. So you don't look, that's when you'll see it. Which explains, of course, a strange Gemara that the Gemara says of Moshe, and this is all relevant, and it's not on a tangent, because this is the days when Moshe asked Hashem to see his face. And these are the answers Hashem gave. So these are like pre-Yom Kippur experiences that we relive every year. So when Moshe said, to show me your face, Hashem says to him, when I wanted to show you my face, you didn't want to look. By the sneh. The first time Moshe encounters God, by the burning bush. So Hashem says, look at me. And Moshe covers his face, doesn't want to look. So Hashem says, when I wanted to show you my face, you didn't want to look. Now, when you want, I'm not going to show it to you. So the Rebbe asks a very fundamental question. What is this, some type of, God forbid, tit for tat, playing a game? To say, God is saying, when I wanted, you didn't do it, so I'm not going to do it when you want. No, but the beer is not. It's the exact opposite. When Eibishter wanted to show it to him, it would be on God's terms, then he'd be able to see it. Now you want to see it on your terms. You want to see it. That's not possible. Because if you knew God, you would be God. So, but he does say, look at my back. Through the bittul of not looking, then you'll be able to achieve and even experience such a high dimension. It's a tremendous concept, which also explains why Yom Kippur we can't just enter with food and drink and what we do on a regular day on Shabbos or on Yontif. Why? Not because Yom Kippur is a sad day. Tisha B'Av you fast because we shouldn't have an appetite. It's Shiva. We're sitting Shiva and we're grieving and mourning the destruction. Yom Kippur is because we're higher than the structure and we are not yet in the capacity to remain completely in our own siyur, which means eating and drinking and celebrating and also experiencing the face of God. So we have to do it as much as possible, minimize our material activities, both in dress and in food, of course, and drink, and how we behave, and all the things that we abstain from, the chamisha, the heyinuyim, the 5 different so-called afflictions, are not afflictions to punish or in any way like that. It's afflictions that are taking us out of the material beings as much as possible so we can experience that divine essence that Yom Kippur reveals within us. So it's a whole different understanding when you think of it that way. Now I know some people will say, well, doesn't Chassidus say, based on the Tikkun Ezer, that Yom Kippur is Kippurim, Yom HaKippurim, and Purim is higher, because it's also one day a year, and you can experience that one day a year with Mishta V'Simcha. That's Purim, you have a Suda, and you finish drink, and it's also a day you can allow to work, technically. So there's that element, and the Rebbe compares that to Erev Yom Kippur, the Kol HaMesana, anyone who fasts on Erev Yom Kippur. I'm sorry, let me correct, anyone who eats, Kol HaEchel B'Tshi, everyone who eats the 9th day of Tishrei, Erev Yom Kippur, and we eat like 2 meals for Yom Kippur as well as Ki'ilu Hisana is considered as if you're fasting on Yom Kippur. So you have the eating and the fasting, and the Rebbe compares that to Purim. But at the end of the day, Yom Kippur is still a fast day. It's still the holiest day of the year. These are all biyurim to focus on and tell us that at the end of the day, when Mashiach comes, and when we reach on that highest level, you could even, in Gashmis, you could also experience the holiness and sanctity of Yom Kippur. But it doesn't take away Ein Inyan Yetzim Midei Pshuta. The Yom Kippur is still the holiest day of the year. And that type of experience of Yechida is by us shedding our garments, so to speak, by not wearing leather, by not indulging in any of the pleasures, even holy pleasures, even intimacy, even sacred intimacy. Why? Because this is a day where you're connecting to the core and you try to get rid of everything possible. The lo yiro, and then you can takasi ponai, through the lo yiro, through the not looking. So all this means in personal terms and in applicable terms is that it's a profound system that actually helps us both introspection and growth, and also get to places that are beyond our scars and our wounds. That no matter what has happened, comes Yom Kippur, it's a clean slate, more than a clean slate. It's going to the core that has never been hurt. Because Yechidik is never affected by all the behavior, which maybe is another reason we don't access it every day. It's protected. It's like Kodesh Kodashim. You don't go into the Holy of Holies every day. Even Yom Kippur, it's only for a short while. Because that's preserved. We don't live in a world, we live in a toxic world where we're not yet capable. That's why a Kohen Gadol who went into the Holy of Holies and had even one flaw would die there. Not as punishment, because it was too holy of a place. Think of it like a piece of dust on your eyeball. It's so sensitive that everything irritates it. So the same thing with us, the purest part of who you are is protected and preserved from the challenges of this world. But once a year, we're given that capacity to enter there and to get what we need to be able to bring it back to our daily lives. So essentially, Yechida informing and empowering Chaya, Nefesh, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh throughout the year. So that's its power, and it's in the context of healing, in the context of growth, in the context of applying it to our lives. Each one of us is a tremendous tool, tremendous awareness and empowerment that you have a day that's coming and we prepare for it. Just like the Kohen Gadol, 7 days prepared for going into the Holy of Holies. We prepare for it. This is what the 10 days of Teshuva are, including Shem Gedalya. We prepare to enter that type of the holiest place of who you are, where you meet God, basically, face to face. But you have to go without looking. You have to go with that humility, with that selflessness. You're not going because you're going to enjoy yourself. You're not going because you want it too much. It has to be because you're really actually accessing the purest part of who you are. If everyone was able to access that, all our problems would disappear. Now, not like a magic pill, but because that power of the mother flame touching the baby flame, so to speak, the spark, the pintel yid in each one of us, in our core essence of Yechida, if we could access that, that is the power to heal. That's the power to grow. When I say heal, I just want to make it clear, it doesn't just mean for people who need healing because they have a problem. We all need to grow. And as my Morich Chassidus say, that Teshuva is not loike dasa toyim, loike dasa el, loike tosa elam. It's not like the mistake that people make. Teshuva is only on a sin. Teshuva is ruach hatoshav el Elkaim, haruach toshav el Elkaim asher nasana. The spirit, ruach, this toshav returns to the Elkaim that gave it. It's the connection back to the core of who we are. And that's capable, that's relates and applicable to everybody. From a tzaddik gomer from a person who needs real healing in the technical sense of the word because of negative stuff, to someone that is on the highest level of a tzaddik gomer because you're connecting on that level. And until we don't have the geula in the fullest sense of the word, we don't have the total fusion of matter and spirit, and therefore this power of this days is critical. What will Yom Kippur be like when Mashiach comes is another discussion, not for here. But clearly, Helikus and Eibishter is Ein Sof. You can imagine there's always higher places to climb. But today we still have to deal with some of the toxins, some of the grime of our lives, and that's where we need to have both Teshuva Tata to clean out the things that are inappropriate, but also prepare ourselves to connect to that purest place. And that is what we try to reach to each other. And that, when you apply that aspect to your life, you're touching upon a place that is beyond any hurt or pain or disappointment or anything that's happened in your life. And that's where everything is possible. The birth of hope on Yom Kippur that Moshe delivered to us. Salachta kidvarecha, as we'll say 3 times right after Kol Nidre, Yom Kippur Eve, this Friday night, is that I've forgiven as you've spoken. The Mesiras Nefesh of a tzaddik, of a rebbe, where he stood and was ready to sacrifice his whole being, not just his body, his soul. Erase my name, Mesifrecha, Machenina Mesifrecha. He broke the tablets, all to allow us to have the ability to have hope, the ability to reconnect to that pure place, the Yechida which is revealed on Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur itself, at the end of the day, after we go through the other 4 stages. So with that, there were 2 questions that I want to address, but before that I want to just read a comment that I received, and I think it's just really a good comment that is relevant to all of us, and I want to also acknowledge it. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, thank you for the weekly broadcasts. I look forward to them each week, and you've never disappointed. Thank you for inspiring us and adding proper Yiddish and Chassidic meaning to our lives. I wanted to take this opportunity to wish you and your family a Ksiv V'Chsimateva, L'Shana Teva Mesukah, a year full of brachas in a revealed manner, Ad Bli Dai. So yes, thank you for the blessings. Kol HaMevarech Mizbarach, all those that bless will be blessed. And a blessing of the Eibishter, which is Teisvas Meruba Le'ikir, which means the additional component is even more than the primary, than the keren, than the base. And this, I want to extend this blessing to everyone who's listening, to everyone who's out there, even those that are not listening. It's a blessing to every individual and everyone, Klal Yisrael, and may we all bless each other, and may these brachas all be fulfilled with the Geula Mitzvah V'Shleim in the fullest sense of the word. Okay, so we covered some Gedalya, we covered Aseres Teshuva in Yom Kippur. I should add one point, in that example of Kirv HaMoyer Ala Nitzutz, so there is like an orbit. And as we get closer to Yom Kippur, the orbit, the spark, and the mother flame, so to speak, the spark, which is the soul of the person, and the mother flame get closer and closer. And in Yom Kippur, closer and closer. Ne'ilah, at the end of Ne'ilah, when we say Shema Yisrael once, and then Baruch Shem, and 7 times Hashem Elokim, that's the point of Mesiras Nefesh, as the Shalah writes, that we cited in our Machzerim, that's the point where the closest the flame touches the essence of who we are, touches the essence of the divine. The Yechida, the Nitzutz Katan, which is that small spark, which is the core of the soul, touches the core of essence, and vice versa. And that's why it's such a powerful moment. But to get there, you have to build. If you want to make the kelim, to be able to appreciate it, you can't just say, you know what, I'll just wait for that moment. The more prepared you are, the more you can internalize it and integrate it, as opposed to just expecting a flash that will change things. All doors are open, but still the more you prepare, the more you can appreciate. Which is why the Arizal also says that someone that doesn't cry in Aseres Teshuva, their neshama and their nefesh is not complete. Ein neshmashe shleima, or ein nafshe shleima. Kol mi she'ein beiche b'Aseres Teshuva. There was fascinating sikha on this topic. It's said in Tovshin Chavtes, and it's printed already. I believe in Chel Liktes in Likutei Sichos Volume 9. What that means is why? How can you make such a statement? Because a neshama is a flame, and when the mother flame gets closer, how is it possible that the flame will not respond? So if someone does not cry, it means something is really blocking. So the neshama can't be complete. Simply put, it means that these tears are tears of a sensing that you're connected to something much greater. You know, sometimes you just burst out in tears without any apparent reason. Not for any particular, not necessarily even connected to pain. It's a sense, an existential type of tear where you either feel there's something much greater and you're missing something, you're not connected to it, or you just sense that greater presence. And that's what happens in Aseres Teshuva. Now, of course, much more can be said on this topic, and you can do your own research, but if you'd like, you also look at my book that I've written called 60 Days, A Spiritual Guide to the High Holidays, especially these days as we build toward Yom Kippur, detailed exercises and detailed steps based on Chassidus and Kabbalah of how we can maximize and benefit of these days and their power in our lives. So think of these days as I don't like to use the word most therapeutic because it has that negative connotation, but it is that. These are the days that are cleansing days. These are days that you can actually really look at your life and correct things and grow. And the places you're stuck, or the places where you have inhibitions or fears or other phobias, real or imagined, this is the time of the year. So I can't emphasize it enough. Chassidus Applied is all about this. It's taking these ideas, taking this time of the year, this energy, and taking the ideas of Chassidus and applying it to exactly that. But it's important to be informed, because if you don't aware of it, the days just go by like any day, and you don't even appreciate the power of each of these days. So in 60 days, you'll see there's actually a daily workbook. Each day describes different elements taken from all these sources of what we can do to actually maximize and tap into and capitalize on these resources that we're given, resources that can help you, can help your family, can help your children, can help every challenge that we face. That's what we have these days for. It's not just tshuva and an aveda that you may think you did or didn't do. It's a tshuva, it's a return to who you really are, to become the person you should be, the reason God sent you to this world, to realign yourself with the purpose and mission of your life, and to get rid of the distractions, or at least minimize them, that they shouldn't be such forces that keep us entangled or trapped or hold us hostage in its tentacles. So this is exactly what the point of all these days are about. Obviously, we do it through the mitzvahs of adding in tshuva and tzedakah and tefillah and prayer and the other things that we do these days. But the point of it all is to achieve that type of connection. And it's critical to take it out of the realm that many of us, the stereotype that it's about, calling up a few people that you feel you may have hurt and get their forgiveness. That's part of the mitzvah too. But it's more than just a mechanical thing to do. It's about a full introspection, in the fullest sense of the word, of your whole life. This is where we are stand accountable, and where we demonstrate that we rise to the occasion on the deepest and most powerful possible level. So here was another question that came in regarding to this. What is healthy fear and love of God? Since we talk so much about Yomim Noirayim, these are days of Noirayim. Noira means fear. Yira, from the word Yira, awesome days. Oyim v'neira. So that's one question. Another question came in similar vein. I have two questions, Rabbi, I have two questions arising from last night's Meaningful Life class. This is referring to my Wednesday night class, which is also broadcast live. It's a different type of class than this. This addresses questions. That's more of a theme or a topic, which you're all welcome to watch. And also on meaningfullife.com, that's where you can see our full schedule of different classes. So this person is asking about that class I gave last week about the topic. Two questions. One is about the idol worshippers at the foot of the mountains. Did they betray God? They didn't really know him, did they? Or did they betray Moses because he was the one who told them to wait for him to come back? The second is more rhetorical, but I would love to hear your view. Rabbi, was talking about fear and or alignment with God. I feel that proper love and a certain kind of fear, as humble reverence and respect for God, is the greatest means for alignment with Hashem. Love and fear as respect and reverence are synonymous. Is that correct, Rabbi? So let me address all these questions. Let me begin, first of all, real fear and love. The word fear drives fear into our hearts, no pun intended. And it's actually has so many negative connotations, it's actually not a good word to use. And I'm not talking about now the technical translation of the word yira. The problem is that when words get loaded and they're trapped in myths and stereotypes, it's not a word that really conveys what you want to convey. And remember, this is English, which is arbitrary words trying to convey a deeper topic. So how would you translate yira? We know there's different levels of yira. There's yira saretzua, fear of punishment. There's yira sarememus, that's fear of something exalted. The best word I always prefer in this context is awe. Awe is a far better word than fear. This doesn't mean that it doesn't have elements of fear, to know that you're afraid of something greater than you are, but fear has that demoralizing dimension. I'm afraid. You're afraid of a thief, you're afraid of the night, you're afraid of danger. And when you start associating God with those words, that's where we get that feeds all those stereotypes that create such negative imagery around everything that's godly and divine. Awe is a whole different experience. You go to Niagara Falls, you see a natural, awesome event, you see something, you see the birth of a child, you see a sunset. It's a very different feeling. How would you equate that awe with the fear of night or the fear of danger? That's why the word fear, I would avoid the word fear, unless you qualify it well. So the word, it's awe. It's awe of God, recognizing that God is beyond us. What then is love? Love is recognizing that God is close to us. So think of a relationship. A good, healthy relationship needs a certain element of closeness. Two people love each other, don't have closeness, then how does the love express itself? An intimacy, even a physical intimacy, definitely a spiritual one, an emotional one, closeness. but they also are two individuals. They also need respect for each other. When you have love without respect and awe, I'm not saying this so you need awe of your spouse. I'm just using it as a human example. But if you don't have respect for your spouse and you just have love, something seriously is missing. Just like if you have respect and you don't have love. So we need both, Ava and Yira, Chesed and Gvura. The things that we relate to, how God relates to us and we relate to God, how God provides us with health, with sustenance, with all the blessings. And then there's recognizing the God that's beyond us. And that evokes awe. So when it comes to this month of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is not meant to cause us trembling like little children in front of a policeman or in front of a principal. It's the awe of standing in the presence of the King. And yes, if you're accountable and you need some things to correct, fine, there may be an element of a little fear too, but not the fear that's meant to be demoralizing, it's meant to be motivating. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, anything demoralizing is always coming from the negative sides. Because what is it doing? What's the end result? It breaks you. It doesn't get you to do anything. Whereas awe and the related fear in the healthy sense, not like of danger or darkness or a thief or and so on, but rather or a murderer, but rather a type of sense of healthy shame, healthy accountability, answering to something far greater than you are. So that's uplifting and empowering as opposed to demoralizing and annihilating or suffocating or obliterating. So that's the definition of good. Now, regarding the other questions that are asked here about the idol worshippers, yes, they absolutely betrayed God. God said, do not have other gods. They heard it in the second of the 10 Commandments, do not create false gods, and they betrayed God. So I'm not sure what the question is. Did they really know him? You have to know God to betray God. They knew he exists. They stood there. They took him out of Egypt. They definitely benefited from God, and they were thankful. And they made him big, and they made more than a mistake. It was a serious, serious sin. So there's no question about that. They did not betray Moses. It was not relevant compared to the betrayal of God. Betrayal of Moses is also true, but that's not the significant point here. Moses needed God's forgiveness for this. Regarding the rhetorical question, yes, you are right. Love and fear as respect and reverence are synonymous. And absolutely, what I just said, humble reverence and respect for God rather than the word fear and trembling and all the negative connotations that I just mentioned. Good. I also want to refer you to episode 6, where I discussed this topic more at length about healthy fear as opposed to unhealthy fear, or the healthy definition of Yiras Hashem as opposed to unhealthy definitions of it. Forgiveness is the next question, which of course is Yom Kippur. Do I need to forgive someone who never showed remorse or asked for forgiveness? I feel resentment towards some individuals who, through their actions, caused me to need to leave my job. Do I need to forgive those who have hurt me and have never showed remorse or asked for forgiveness? I was thinking about how Yosef HaTzadik only showed his brothers kindness after he tested them to see if they had done Teshuva. In other words, they are Yosef, so that they did do Teshuva. So obviously Yosef, we know, well, we'll talk about Yosef in a moment. There's a whole siman Shulchan Aruch in the laws of healthiest of Yom Kippurim about the laws of Mechila, both the obligation of someone who's hurt someone to ask for forgiveness, and both the obligation of someone who was hurt to give forgiveness, which means to forgive. And it's a very clear mitzvah, and it's part of how we heal on both ends of the story. But there are conditions. Let's say somebody did not come to you for forgiveness. Are you supposed to forgive anyway? There, in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch specifically, he elaborates on two circumstances where you don't have to forgive if someone comes to ask for forgiveness. One, if by forgiving you get hurt, that's actually the second thing. The first thing is that if you see their heart isn't broken enough and you feel they need more tshuva, so you don't forgive because you need them to work harder on themselves. And the second is if you feel that if you get hurt by giving forgiveness, you don't have to forgive. It's very interesting. I talked about this a number of times, especially the first one. God is literally giving you, the Torah is giving you the power to decide whether that person is broken up. Why? Because that person hurt you, you're giving that power. And it's not because of revenge. Because clearly, and it's not just a compassion, it's a mitzvah to forgive. And remember, forgiveness, mechila, comes from the word mochel, circle. Forgiving is closing the circle. It's not just for others. So that way you could argue technically both ways. You could say, you know what, even if a person doesn't come for forgiveness, I forgive because I want to free myself from this problem. It's their problem. I want to close my circle. So you're not really forgiving them per se. You're just you're forgiving yourself. You're forgiving the situation. You want to move on. On the other hand, you could argue, based on what I just cited, that no, if a person doesn't even come for forgiveness, even if they come, you're entitled to determine that perhaps they're not ready yet to be forgiven for either one of the two reasons I mentioned. Especially if someone doesn't even come. However, you could argue l'fnim mishur sadin, a chassid does not wait, and maybe you forgive even if a person doesn't come. But you may not be doing a disservice to them, because if they're not ready for really asking for forgiveness, just to forgive, they're just getting them off the hook. That's what the Shulchan Aruch seems to imply. So my answer is that it's not a black and white issue. I think it's case by case, and different circumstances would provide different situations. I think it's important that you should realize if you don't forgive, it shouldn't come from a tinge of revenge and vengeance. It's not about you. So maybe it's good to run it by a third party to see, because it could be, you have to be very careful that you're withholding forgiveness maybe because you just want to get even. It's just the satisfaction of that type of tit for tat. However, the Shulchan Aruch definitely leaves room for a person to decide if the other person is not broken yet enough. But this should be reviewed with an independent party and an objective friend, because to determine you're doing it for the right reasons and not for the wrong ones. Okay. Let's go to the next question. Next is, we'll talk a moment about Vov Tishrei. Vov Tishrei is going to be, today's Dalet is going to be in 2 days, is going to be the 53rd yahrzeit of the Rebbe Tzanchana, the Rebbe's mother. I thought, fitting to Chassidus Applied, being that this is in the spirit, I would not be here not for the Rebbe would not be here not for his mother. And the derech eretz that we saw the Rebbe give to the Rebbe Tzanchana was in the Shire, unbelievable. I mean, I saw it myself as a little child, but it's well known how the Rebbe would visit her every day once she came to America. And then her passing was Vov Tishrei Tafshin Chof Hei, 53 years ago. I actually remember that Shabbos was Vov Tishrei, when there was the Istalkus, the next day was the Levaya. I remember the Fabrengen, with Shabbos Shuva, of course. And as a kid, 770 was still the smallest shul downstairs, but it was the smallest version before it expanded. So as a children, we would sit in the back there, there was like these bookcases today, but these were spaces we could sit and see. And I remember, and I mean, this is a memory of a child, basically 8 years old. And I remember that the Rebbe's face, I remember, was very red at some point, and the Rebbe stood up to Nigun, which was the Nigun that today we sing with the words Prozes Teshuv Yerushalayim and Tafshin Chovches. It would be 3 years later. The Rebbe taught it with those words. Prozes Teshuv Yerushalayim, Prozes Teshuv, Prozes Teshuv Yerushalayim. And then it was sung without those words, and it actually was a faster beat. And the Rebbe stood up to that Nigun. I remember the Rebbe's face was flaming fire. And clearly later it was understood why. I never really confirmed this with some older people, but that's my memory. And then right after the Fabrengen, the Rebbe went, not home, but he went to his mother's house and then to the hospital. And the Stalkos was that later that afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, late afternoon. And of course the Rebbe after that began explaining every week a Rashi. Of many things that he did in tribute to his mother was one thing starting a Rashi. I always wondered why Rashi. But the Rebbe, the big emphasis of the Rebbe in teaching Rashi was Ben Chomesh L'Mikra. That Rashi writes that I write my commentary for even a 5-year-old child. It was always known without the unspoken that the 5-year-old child, the way the Rebbe was speaking, was the Rebbe must have been this 5-year-old child because it's a pretty sharp 5-year-old child. Now, who most likely taught the Rebbe the first Rashis that he learned? Who's the Ben Chomesh L'Mikra under whose tutelage and who's nurturing? It's usually the mother, as the Rebbe always says. A father's education starts later. I'm sure the Rebbe's father was involved. But I was thinking that perhaps the Ben Chomesh L'Mikra, the quintessential 5-year-old, was the way the Rebbe went back to his own 5-year-old and honoring the mother of this 5-year-old, the Rebbe, through dedicating and creating a whole revolution in commentary of Rashi. Just a thought. As far as Vov Tishrei, there's so much to say besides that, the Mesiras Nefesh of the Rebbe Tzanchana. And of course the reunion, as we know, that for almost 20 years they did not see each other because the Rebbe left Russia, Tafresh Peiches. That would be 1928. And he would see his mother the first time in 1947. Almost 20 years later. In the months of Adar, the Rebbe went to Paris. After he came to America in 1941, he went to Paris to greet his mother who had just come out of Russia in 1946. In 1947, they spent a few months there over Pesach.
And after Shavuos, and they came to America, the Rebbe brought his mother with the papers and all that had to be done to the United States. But just recently, just now, they just discovered, or at least was published, a letter that was never seen before. It's a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe dated Yud Sivan, Thursday Yud Sivan Tafshin Zayin, to Mechutanti, my Mechuteneste, which is, of course, Harabonis Hakfedim Araschana Tichya. So the Rebbe writes a bracha to her and says in response that to your letter, B'birchas Achag, I send you a letter that everything should be in good health and you should have a good trip. Ukashura Benachas from your children and from their children. And obviously he was referring to the Rebbe and Yisrael Ad Yaleib, who had a child. V'nisra kolonu, we should see each other Benachas v'reiv tuv gashmi v'ruchni. Mechutana Hadei Shlem, it was Muvarcha, the Rebbe Frierdiker Rebbe's signature. But at the bottom he writes that I'm also including here a bracha b'gashmi v'ruchni to your son, my son-in-law, my dear and beloved son-in-law, and writes the Rebbe's name, and says, I am yearning, I am pining to see you. And Hashem should succeed your journey, and back to your daughter, your wife, and all should be in a peaceful and a complete way. But it's an interesting expression, so I just thought I'd help publicize this letter that just was published with some background in a kuntras called Michtav, with more background about this, and this is in honor of Vov Tishrei. The Rebbe spoke many lessons from the Rebbe Tzachana, always many of them hinted to in her Rosh Tevis of her name, Chala Nida Adlokas Nedis, Chana or Hachain, the three primary mitzvahs connected to a woman, which is Chala Kashrus, and Nida is a Tarsha Mishpacha, and Adlokas Nedis, which is lighting candles on Shabbos, the three mitzvahs that we also know Sarah did so faithfully, and Rivka was recognized by Yitzchak to be the appropriate spouse for him, a soulmate, when he saw that her tent had the three features that his mother had, that there was a Ner Shabbos that was lit from Friday to Friday, that burned from Friday to Friday, there was a Baruch HaMetzia Be'isa, blessing in her dough, which is kashrus, and there was a oil, there was a cloud that was over her an aura, you can say, over her tent, which is the idea of Taras HaMishpacha, a purity and a sanctity. So that's Vov Tishrei. And obviously the lesson to us in an applied way is firstly even just learning the basic lessons of respect for a mother, for a parent, the way the Rebbe treated his mother in that respect, as busy as he was, go visit her literally every day. That's on a very basic level, but also the lessons from Rebbe Tzachana, her dedication to her husband, the Rebbe's father, the Aseres Nefesh she made in creating the ink, as the Rebbe so often emphasizes the ink, so he should be able to write his commentary, and the anguish that they went through. But at the end, you see the pictures and see the images of the Rebbe's and Chana's nachas from her son, and the different things we've already seen in her memoirs. We found her diaries that have been published recently in her description of her years over the years, and especially years here in America as well. And of course we pay tribute because the Rebbe's mother, and the Rebbe's mother is part of shaping who the Rebbe is, and many of the stories of the Rebbe's personal young years, formative years, are connected to his mother's relationship with him and her bringing him up. Okay, let us go now to next question. See, I think I have more questions I'm able to handle in one program, but we'll try our best here. The next question is there such a thing as modern Chabad? Sociological changes in Chabad. In addition to my counseling and psychotherapy practice, I have endeavored into being a shatran, particularly for the Chabad community, helping people in their late 20s and 30s find their bashet. At least half of the profile cascades that I receive almost daily of interested candidates are self-described as modern Chabad, quote unquote. I find that to be a misnomer, since my experience of Chabad is adhering to halachic and traditional frum standards to the utmost or beyond. My understanding of a chassid is someone who goes beyond the letter of the law. I'm asking that you please address the sociological changes in the Chabad community and how modern society has impacted the standards and norms. How would you define modern Chabad, quote unquote? Thank you. Well, Let me begin I want to speak about this in two different perspectives. I'm going to speak about it first ideologically and on what our standards are, the so-called the doctrine, and second I will talk about it on a personal level to individuals, because I believe when you mix these two, you always get into trouble. The Torah has its standards, and then we have to learn how those standards can be applied to our lives where we are right now. But if we start changing those standards based on our needs, or based on our interpretation, or based on our comfort zone, or based on our ignorance, or worse, that is a gross distortion and an injustice to us and to the Torah and everything. So I think it's vital in all areas. What does the Torah say about something? Then you can say, where do I stand in regard to that, and where am I up to? So let's start with this. Chabad is not some type of a man-made movement where people can determine, whoever likes, what is the definition of Chabad. One day it's this, and 50 years from now it's another. Today is a modern version of Chabad. Chabad is an acronym for Chochmah Bina Das, a system established by the Alter Rebbe, and Neshama Chadosha, based completely on Torah, coming straight from Har Sinai. So it would be like someone saying, modern Torah, a modern mitzvahs. There's a Torah, it's immutable, it's unchangeable, immutable. The Torah is Zulei Teimah Chlefes. It's exactly as we received it from Matan Torah, and no human being, no rabbi can change the Torah. The Torah itself has built in a system of how you apply it, how it so-called addresses situations and circumstances. Yes, and addresses. That's part of the day the Eibishter made the Torah that Rabbanim, and starting from Moshe Rabbeinu, should argue and discuss topics and know how to apply it to particular generational challenges, but never tampering with the etzem of the Torah. The Torah itself is unchangeable. So I would apply the same thing with Chabad. Chabad is the standards established by the Rabbeim, starting from the Alter Rebbe, going through all the Rabbeim and the Rebbe, and that's it, period. Not you, not I, nobody can come and suddenly say we have a new version of Chabad. Whether it's a modern version, or whether someone says it's a brisker version, or it's an ancient version, or it's an Aturi Garsha version, or it's a conservative version, or a liberal version. All these things are man-made labels that we don't recognize. Not on Torah and not on Chabad. So I want to just state that for the record. That shouldn't be any unequivocally unacceptable, all these titles, whether it's Chabad Light or Modern Chabad or other things, which I should also refer you. I spoke about in episodes 24 and 25. Now is another question. Where do we stand today? We see young people, we see older people struggling. Some don't have a relationship with the Rebbe. They don't understand the Rebbe's role. Some people say, I never saw this Rebbe. I was born later. Some people don't identify with the philosophies of Chabad. Some don't know what they are. So we have challenges. But let's not, as I said a number of weeks, last week and 2 weeks ago, let's not turn our challenges and our doubts and our questions into a philosophy. Suddenly give it a name. It's like saying, the ignorant Chabad. There is no such thing as ignorant Chabad. Chabad is Chabad. You may be ignorant of what Chabad is. You may feel that you're a modern person and you're struggling how to fit Chabad into your life. Fine. That's a legitimate concern. This was a concern that the Baal Shem Tov and all Chassidus came. Jews were entering into a modern world, and how can they fit faith into modernity without compromising the faith? This was not a simple matter. So that there's challenges, absolutely, as you say here, with people writing modern Chabad, they're writing it because they're trying to give an identity of knowing who could be appropriate shidduch for them. I understand that. I'm not criticizing it. The reason I was being so adamant was not because I can't stand someone using that word, but I don't want it to become a title and a name that now sticks and that becomes a new thing. There's modern Chabad. There is no modern Chabad. There's one Chabad. Now, Chabad, did the Rebbe take Chabad to another dimension? Of course, he addressed Chabad without compromising one iota of the Alter Rebbe's teachings and all the Rebbeim to our modern 20th and 21st century. Whether it's through shlichus, whether it's using technology or other things that didn't exist in Lubavitch and those times. But it did not compromise the spirit. So that's why I'm very avoidant of using a title. Now, as far as people go, of course, there are many people who have great challenges. They have a certain feeling for Chabad. I guess a person writing Modern Chabad probably wants to say is that I believe in the Chabad manhagim and customs and its ideas, but I'm not really strict. I'm more like a modern version of it. May not have a beard, or may touch my beard, things that are not the standards necessarily of mainstream. I don't say even mainstream Chabad, of what Chabad that Rebbeim set in motion. That I understand, and I understand where it's coming from. But that's why I still wanted to make this distinction. How to deal with this issue of our new generation, or for all generations, how to adapt. That's where we need mashpim. You need rabbanim, as the Rebbe said very clearly, who can help each individual. And this is also what I do almost every week when we talk about different topics. A lot of it is about this topic. How do we take these beautiful and powerful and relevant and timeless values of Torah in general, and Chassidus in particular, and Chassidus Chabad even more particular, and apply it to our lives without changing what it says, but applying it. That is the challenge. I think that all people who call themselves Marno Chabad or any other names, if they knew the relevance that Chassidus and Chabad has to their personal issues, they'd be shocked. That's our challenge. But that was not really the question, so I'm not going to go there right now. I've discussed it other times, and suffice it to say, that's what we'll stop with that. The next question, because of time, I see that I'm going to need to cut out a few questions and move them to next week. I apologize for that, but that's life. It's all for good reason, because we've been dealing with these topics, and I wanted to address all the material that I'd addressed until now. Let me just see here where we are. I will go now to the Chassidus question of the week, and then the essays, and the topics that we announced. If they're not addressed one week, they'll be addressed, always guaranteed, next week or the next week after that. So please don't feel that you're missing anything. Just tune in the coming weeks. And this is a good opportunity also to invite your questions and your comments on anything we speak about or new topics. Everything is permitted. Nothing is taboo. meaningfullife.com/mylife, where there's an anonymous forum that you can please take advantage of and present all your questions. So I will, let's see here. I'm not going to cover the tiniest, Ayin Hara. A lot of questions, a lot of issues, my friends. So let's go to the question. Chassidus' question is about avodas hatfila. It's a question that comes in very regularly. Every few weeks, another person writes about this. So I don't see this as being a one-time discussion. I've talked about it a number of times. That is the area of prayer. And I've already discussed it in episodes 18, 19, and 20. So I refer you to there, and I think I should be discussing it even more, but especially now, where so many prayers are being said, Rosh Hashanah, Tzom Gedalya, Kippur, of course, a whole day of prayer, that it's worthwhile addressing. And the way the question is posed is very bluntly stated. Why don't we daven the way Chassidus expects of us? Yes, very good question. And I include myself in being one of the people who does not daven the way Chassidus expects of us. So I don't see this just as an issue that is for others. I think it also speaks to me. My basic and from the off-the-cuff response to that is because we don't know how to daven. And even if we do, based on what we've learned, we're lazy and we're not doing what we should be doing. To learn a Maimach Chassidus, especially if you have a Geschmack in Chassidus, your Nefesh Habamis, your animal soul enjoys it because it's very stimulating, it's very spiritual, it's very transcendent, it's brilliant. Same thing learning Gemara, for that matter. Tefillah is Aveda Shebelev. Aveda Shebelev is a whole different thing. Aveda Shebelev is your emotions. Many people think, my emotions, I'm wired a certain way, and that's it. I love as much as I will love, and I'm not going to change that. I have good midas, that's how I'm wired. I have bad midas, that's how I'm wired. We'll try to repress and control and harness a bit, but to say that I'm going to work on my personality and my character, you don't find this as a common thing. So to sit down and say, that's sitting down and really working with your heart. Not understanding God alone, but emoting with God, relating. And that is a far, far more difficult thing. Unfortunately, our yeshiva systems have not taught us how to do it. They may have expected it, they may have preached it, and so on, but you have to look at the results. Most of davening is, unfortunately, lip service. And I have to state it, even though it may be something people don't want to hear, but that's the fact. Whenever I see someone Shabbos or Yontif sitting and davening for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours under a talis or a bocher, I admire that. At least they're making an attempt. In our days, when people did that, often they were laughed at. Who do you think you are? You should think you're going to be a davener. Davening is a critical component in Chassidus everywhere, and it's not just the davening, sitting and saying words, it's the emoting, it's the applying, it's the Kabbalah sale of sitting and submitting to God, not just learning and understanding God. I would say ultimately all Chassidus applied is Aveda. That's Aveda. Some people said, what do you mean applied Chassidus? Isn't all Chassidus supposed to be applied? Absolutely. But you see the Rabbeim come and they speak very harshly about those that learn the Haskalah, the philosophy of Chassidus, without applying it, without the Aveda. So we're not looking at the Chadus that you need Aveda, we're looking to actually make the Aveda. Applied Chassidus is not to say, oh, by the way, Chassidus should be applied. It's how do we apply it? Like the Alter Rebbe says, Eich hu karev ma'ed. We know that it's karev elecha medavar ma'ed. Eich. As he explains in the Sharblat and Tanya, that Tanya is coming, the first section of Tanya is coming to explain. So the question is how? And Avedus Atfilah, there's no question, is a key component in that whole process. So that would be my quick answer, so to speak, why people don't daven the way Chassidus expects. So the question is, what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Is this an individual thing? Can we put our heads together and create, I don't want to call it a tefillah club, but maybe some type of commitment, joint commitment, where people say, you know, we're going to start davening properly. I can tell you, I get letters like that. They say, if you started davening properly, you could change the whole Lubavitch. Meaning the Lubavitch, meaning the people. I thank you for your vote of confidence, but there's no but actually. I have no excuse. Maybe I should. I don't know if I could say that. It's up to me. I think, however, that the using this platform and ignoring this issue is also irresponsible and absolutely is a topic. Now, I know some people will say, maybe there's no Advaita Satfilah today anymore. Or at least not a primary thing. Today's shlichus. We have to say when the building is burning, you're going to sit down now and daven for 5 hours. But if you look at the sichos, the Rebbe never negated it. The Rebbe said, yes, a priority. Obviously, a fire is burning. And there's a shlichus. But under shlichus, once you establish, you have time to daven in the morning. There's Shabbos and Yontif. And maybe that's a way of also inspiring and being a role model for the people in your community, as well as your own personal refinement. How could someone not be affected by that? So the question is how we integrate it and internalize it. So I'll be speaking about this. I don't know if I'll be speaking every week, but I'm trying to dedicate, because there's a bunch of questions that have come in on the topic and suggestions. So let's look at this as a mini-series on prayer and davening that I've now initiated. In addition to what we did back then, a while back, in episodes 18 through 20. So we'll suffice with that. I'll just conclude one more point about this, since Yom Kippur is coming. The Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch, it's better to say one prayer with real kavanah than just to say a lot of things without kavanah. Now, this is not a head to not to daven, chas v'shalom, but it tells you something. Can someone really read, be honest, and say, I'm going to read the entire Machzor, even Rosh Hashanah davening, let alone Yom Kippur? And I'm going to be able to not just say every word, but a kavanah of each word, the avodah of each word. I don't see how it's possible. Even reading it with Pirush Amilis it can take an entire day. Look at just how many pages. So I would suggest, based on this halacha, that we should take one tefillah or one section, and that's where you put your focus on. It's a long day of davening. It could be any tefillah that speaks to you. Prepare yourself beforehand. Don't wait till the day of Yom Kippur itself. We're supposed to prepare. Prepare a tefillah and maybe put into it the real kavanas of what is nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. It could be something in the Eilah, it could be something in Kol Nidrei, and in the Ma'ariv. Any one of the 5 tefillahs. If you could do more than one, tov aleichem bracha. Be blessed. But at least one, and with that type of effort, you can begin to flex those muscles, we'll call the Avedic muscles of Iza Aveda Shebelev, the lev, the heart, the emotional intelligence, of conditioning it to be something a little better than has been till now. And I think it's a great beginning to begin on Yom Kippur. What better day? But now we have a few days preparation. So that's a practical suggestion. I will try to implement it myself as well. And then we can compare notes after Yom Kippur as we prepare for the next stage of our Aveda. And we will talk more about Tefillah. If you have any comments on this or suggestions, please share them at meaningfullife.com/mylife. And I will definitely incorporate it in the discussions in the coming weeks. Let us go, as our custom is now, to the essays. So we have 3 essays, which we cover, essays that were written in this past year's 3rd annual MyLife Chassidus Applied Essay Contest. The first is The Meaning of Life Based on Chassidus by Chaim Shcherbina. I hope I pronounced it correct. Age 23, Brooklyn, New York. The Meaning of Life Based on Chassidus.
a young man. And he writes, the issue I wish to address is very basic. Everyone asks themselves at one point or another, why was I born? Sometimes this thought presents itself in other ways. For example, why did God decide that I should wake up this morning? Or what is the purpose of my life? Unfortunately, not everyone has a satisfactory answer to this provoking and challenging question. Depression or confusion can result. At times, this issue can send a person soul-searching, though who knows where one will end up. Through the channels of Chassidus, the answer, however, is quite clear. To clarify and better resolve this dilemma, I wish to present the concepts of Moida Ani and Dira B'Tachtenim. And then writes very personally about him walking down a street. And I found this to be a very well thought through essay. Someone who applied themselves seriously to write, apply some things that we're very familiar with, but in a personal manner. And coming up with these questions, discovering that the options that either people go party and they ignore their big questions, or it leads them to a state of depression, that we have to go with an approach of why do we ask these questions in the first place, and why don't we find quick answers? Talks about the concealment, the state of the world in general, and the state of man in particular, where God is concealed, and what we do to reverse that concealment so we can reconnect to this type of purpose, using Moida Ani and connecting to the essence of the Jewish soul. Some of the themes I spoke about a bit earlier today. In summary, he concludes the answer to this person's dilemma, which means the search for is a place for him is that there is a place for him in this world. We have a mission in this world to bring down God's presence. Each one of us is an integral part of this mission. Every single deed counts. God brought us down to this world for a reason. We need to live our lives, but make them into a dwelling place for the one above. Again, these may be familiar themes, but the way it's presented is quite personal, and I recommend reading it. This and the other essays can be seen as they're posted every week. New essays are posted at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. We have all the resources, including the essays of 2017. Essay number 2 is True Feminism by Chava Hinsey. This is age 26. JNet Women's Coordinator and part-time program director at the Chabad at Columbia University. Lives in Brooklyn, New York. Also age 26, Chava Hinsey. Very interesting essay about true feminism. If Hillary Clinton had won the presidential election, a good percentage of the country would have celebrated the first female president of the United States. True, there would have been a woman in the Oval Office. Practically, however, nothing about her way of ruling the country would have been feminine. In fact, she would probably have gone out of her way to take a masculine approach in order to be taken seriously. What kind of victory would that have been for women and feminism? Goes into a very, I would say, pretty scathing analysis of what modern feminism is about, that it's really just trying to turn women into men and give them those types of equal rights, and essentially losing the sight of the power of what a woman really is. Again, this is an idea that you may have heard, and we've all heard ideas like this, but she does it in a very powerful way, presents this idea, the concept of that the real woman is the concept of Malchus, and Chassidus will teach us how feminine leadership is the most ideal type of leadership, which is predicated on an interdependence on those she is leading, selfless humility, and the power to actualize potential. And goes on to describe the real feminine leader. Really good essay in that sense. And obviously coming from Rosh Hashanah, which is Binyan HaMalchus, very much connected to that. Talking about the physiology and even the things that some of the emotional and psychology and spirituality of a woman that others dismiss as weakness is really crucial humility in the model of feminine leadership, I should say. And describes it really very well done. And describes it with the feminine champions of the world, what they would achieve and how they would bring out in people their essence, their best, the best in them. And with a very good conclusion, just looking at this end line that I want to read, yes, the last line I want to read is a truly equitable society would cherish and esteem the foundational contribution of women as the backbone of a country. In our current world, gender identity has become such a source of confusion and pain. To know what the masculine and feminine are from a godly perspective, give us guidelines to flourish within. Well done essay, and let us go to the third essay now. Finally, it's also about similar topic. Are women equal to men? A Chassidic view, written by Countess Rivka Elkaim. Age 65, Bal Harbor, Florida.
Are women equal to men? A Chassidic view. Quite often people are curious to know the Orthodox Jewish view on the equality of the genders, especially the Chassidic view. Basically, she goes ahead and dispels many of the myths around this issue and breaks it down into real details. Women in the Torah, personalities in Torah, women in Nevi'im and Ksuvim, women in Halacha, the different controversy about different women, what they're minyan, aliyahs, tefillin, women rabbis, women in Chassidus. So it's a pretty thorough take, and it goes basically captured in understanding the real difference that men are conquerors and women are nurturers. And nicely annotated and with sources. And with that, I will conclude. She writes, we have seen from the above how the argument that in Orthodox circles women are treated as second-class citizens and disrespected is totally false. Not only that, but in fact, women are more respected and valued than in liberal factions and any other religion or social system because they are respected and valued for the feminine and equal roles they lead. But I'll let you read all of it on your own. And with that, let us conclude this episode. Gmar Chasim Teva to everyone. As we count down the days of Aseres Teshuva, there's the two opinions of the Arizal and the Ramak, which I cite and explain in 60 days, whether we go from the 10 days, 10 spheres, whether we go Mamayla Lamata or Mamata Lamayla, and a very fascinating Tzemach Tzedek that addresses that, how Rosh Hashanah and Kippur fit into that model, those two models. So if we want to have a Gmar Chasim Teva, may our tefillahs go straight to heaven, pierce all the heavens to bring down all the brachas in abundance in every possible way, begashmis and beruchnis, and we always start with gashmis, healthier, parnasa bar chava, livelihood in abundance, as I said, and with healthy children, and nachas from our children on all cylinders, on all levels. And until next Sunday, which will be the day B'Shem Hashem, the day after Yom Kippur, every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m., this has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, special Yom Kippur edition, episode 181, a Gmar Chasim Teva.